just been to the doctor, and the doctor has told you that your child has cancer. And because you're living here in Dubuque, Iowa, there aren't any oncologists that will treat the pediatric patients, so you'll end up having to travel to a different hospital, most often to the University of Iowa, but there are other hospitals in the area that people travel to. And I'm sure that the first thought that people think is, we're going to go there, because again, with your child having cancer, you're going to do everything that you possibly can to save his or her life. And then you get to the University of Iowa hospitals, and your child is going to have a CT scan, a PET scan, they're going to have their blood drawn, poked and prodded, because of course the physicians want to make sure that they get the most definitive diagnosis so they know how to appropriately treat your child. And when they tell you that your child's going to have to come, perhaps for the next 6 months for chemotherapy, every 3 weeks for 5 days. Again, your initial thought is, we'll be here. And then people take a step back and they begin to wonder, how are we going to do this? How much is this going to cost? How much is the travel going to cost? How much is our insurance going to cover? How am I going to tell my job that I can't be here every 3 weeks for 5 days? And then perhaps some. And then people start to get into that mold. But again, you do everything you can because your child has cancer. Childhood cancer, the average cost for a case of childhood cancer, according to the National Childhood Cancer Society, is $623,000. And when you look at that number, it's going to depend upon how much you pay of that, on your insurance, on how much your co-pays are, how much your deductibles are. And the saving grace about medical costs is that people don't have to pay them up front. You don't have to walk into the hospital and they say, give us $623,000 and then we'll treat your child. You actually will get those back in bills. There's something very different, and that is with travel costs, because travel costs have to be paid the day that you're traveling. And what do those things look like? Looking at a trip from here to the University of Iowa Hospital, gasoline, you have lodging, and thank goodness for the Ronald McDonald House, because they do try to make things as cost-effective as possible for families. You've got parking, you've got meals for one parent, maybe 2 parents, maybe the additional children at home that are traveling. And probably for a lot of us, this doesn't look that overwhelming. But 43% of families, one of the parents ends up either giving up their job completely, or they end up reducing their employment to care for their child. Again, when a child's going through chemotherapy, most often when they do come home, there's going to be nausea, vomiting, fatigue, depressed immune systems, and they're not going to be able to go back to school. So the parent ends up staying home with them. When you translate these costs into 6 months, into a year, or even into 3 years, they really become overwhelming for families. And like I said, you're adding these costs onto all the medical costs that come around as well. So there is also, if your child has been, unfortunately, one of those children that has a far advanced disease or needs to be treated at a specialized hospital, you're going to end up having costs that include things such as flights, taxi fees, parking, in addition to all those other costs that we've already looked at. And I'm certain you'll be on the next flight if they tell you that the only place that can treat your child is MD Anderson or Memorial Sloan Kettering, because you'll do everything that you can to save your child's life. So when we decided to build this foundation and really help those families with those costs. Our mission at the Compass to Care, the Mike and Sandy Ernsdorff Childhood Cancer Foundation, is to schedule and pay for the travel arrangements that families require when seeking the best cancer care for their children. And we're very different from a lot of organizations. There are foundations out there that do help people with medical costs and with other things that are associated with a child with cancer. Nobody does this. Nobody helps schedule and pay for all the arrangements. And who is it that we're trying to help? Anybody who has a child under 18 that's been diagnosed with cancer, that is traveling 60 miles or greater from their home, and that has a financial need. Again, some of those costs to people in the room may not seem that overwhelming, but that's why we want to be certain that we are helping those families where it is overwhelming for them. And what is our goal? Again, we really want to make it effortless and free. And we absorb every cost that's associated with travel, whether it be from airfare, meals, parking fees, anything that is going to be a cost to those families. And I know that there may be others in the room, but there's definitely two people here that know exactly what that feels like, and that's my parents. And the reason that I'm so passionate about this, and the reason why we decided to build this, is because if you saw our posters and our mailers that went out, the child on there is me. In 1974, I was diagnosed with kidney cancer. I initially had blood in my urine, or blood in my diaper, and my mom took me to the doctor. And the doctor told my mom that they thought I had a tumor. And my mom tells a story about driving home because she cannot believe that this is what the doctor is saying to her. And if you've ever been to my house, there's a lot of steps going up to the top of the stairs. And my mom said that she was walking up the stairs as my dad came out the door and handed me off. Sorry. He handed me off to my dad as she collapsed. The next day, I went for testing, and they determined that I had a Wilms tumor, which is a kidney tumor, and that I need to be treated at the Mayo Clinic. And so we ended up having to fly there. They wanted my mom and I and a nurse to get on a helicopter and fly, and my mom said it was her first flight. And when you look at that, I'm sure my parents, their first thought wasn't, can we afford it? It was get her on the plane and figure out what they can do to save my life. And then we got up there, and I ended up having my kidney removed, and I had radiation therapy, and then I had 18 months of chemotherapy, which caused us to have to travel back and forth, just as I was explaining earlier. And there was a moment where we drove up, and they determined I was more ill than they had anticipated, and I ended up being admitted into the hospital. And they had one car because both my parents came, and I had two siblings back at home, and my dad needed to get back at work. And my mom needed a car while she was up there, and so my mom stayed with me, and my dad ended up hitchhiking back. And I've been in the oncology environment. I've been working in the medical field for 14 years, and I just realized, like, my parents' story is not that unique, that there are so many families that will do everything that they can. And I don't think people should have to be like my dad. And so we decided to build this. And what is it that we need? We really, like I said, we just started. We began in March, and we've been seeking donations and have had overwhelming response of people that realize, like, this is something that's a huge need. And I've had so many people tell me, that it's something that they never thought about. I never really thought about the fact that travel is going to cost families, but it's really like taking a vacation every couple weeks. And so we're looking for people individuals as well as companies, to donate. We're looking for people to volunteer because this is something we cannot do all by ourselves. And then we're looking for you all to tell a friend. The more people that know about the need that these families have, and the more people that know about the need that we're trying to serve, the more families will be able to help. As I said earlier, this is the beginning of our foundation, and we had decided that, our board decided that at the beginning of, at the end of summer, we would help our first family. Well, like I said, we've had an overwhelming response, and we were able to raise enough money to help our first family. And our first family happens to be a family from Dubuque. And it is Austin Fossack. And Austin was diagnosed in January with lymphoma. And that scenario that I showed you a little bit earlier, traveling every 3 weeks for 5 days, is exactly what Austin had gone through. The unfortunate thing is that his mom is a single mother, and she did have to go on family medical leave, which left her with no income.